Hey guys, it's Hollywood Studios here, and in today's video I'm going to be ranking the coasters of Six Flags Magic Mountain from worst to best. But before I go any further, I do have to clarify that there were quite a few coasters closed on my visit to the park in 2023. Those coasters include Apocalypse, Goliath, Magic Flyer I Could Not Ride, Ninja, Riddler's Revenge, Speedy Gonzales Hot Rod Racers, and the backwards side of Superman. So I did get to ride the forward side of Superman. But I still did get to go on a bunch of great rides, and before I rank them, I do want to make it clear, this is not the definitive list, this is not factual, this is simply my opinions, and I'm sure a lot of you will disagree with my opinions. So without further ado, let's start off with the bottom 4 and then get into the top 10. Number 14 is Roadrunner Express. This is one of the park's 4 kiddie coasters, 2 of which I was able to ride. And this one probably is the better ride than the other one I was able to ride. It's a fairly smooth coaster, is fairly well themed for Six Flags, but to me it didn't really have many forces that the other one did, which of course leads me to number 13, which was Canyon Blaster. This is one of the E&F Miler kiddie coasters, and these can tend to be very aggressive. This one certainly was aggressive. It threw you out of your seat on the last couple of hills, and had some pretty good theming as well, so that's why I have it just a little above the last one. At number 12, we have Gold Rusher, which is the park's Aero Mine Train. This is a really long ride, but it doesn't really do too much with its layout. It did have one very surprising moment of airtime towards the end of the ride. We rode in the front, so maybe it would have been better in the back, but I thought it was an okay Aero Mine Train, not necessarily one of the better ones, but not really a bad one either. Number 11 is the New Revolution. This ride was the first coaster to feature a vertical loop, and it's very similar to that of Super Duper Looper at Hershey Park, where the loop is definitely the highlight of the ride, and the rest of the ride really doesn't do all that much. We rode towards the front, not in the very front of the coaster, but I thought the layout itself was just okay. It didn't really do all that much with its length, because it is a fairly long ride. It was a pretty tame coaster, definitely more of a family coaster, but still a fun ride nonetheless. Now we get into the top 10, and at number 10 we have Scream, which is the park's B&M floorless coaster. This is actually a mirror image of Medusa at Six Flags Great Adventure. Personally, I think it might be a little better than that of Medusa just because it felt a little smoother. It does still have that B&M rattle that most of their older coasters have gotten over the years, but it has some good force, 7 inversions, all of which are really good. It does have a horrible setting though, being on a parking lot, not very visually appealing, but the ride itself was fine. I do like the color scheme, the blue and orange really does pop and look nice, and overall it was a pretty good ride, a bit forgettable though in the park's giant lineup. Coming in at number 9 is Superman Escape from Krypton. This coaster is really cool because it is the tallest coaster in the park by far, also the fastest coaster in the park by far, but probably the shortest coaster in the park. All you do is you launch up to 100 miles an hour, you go straight up, and then you come straight back down. But it is a really cool rush. The restraints are a bit weird on the ride. It has the same over the shoulders as a ride like King Ka, and if you sit on the edge, you have these weird arm guards that block your arm from going up, which I thought was really stupid. The ride itself though was fun. I only got to ride the forward side like I said, but that blast of air, especially on a hot Californian summer day like it was when we went, was definitely much appreciated. Moving on to number 8, we have Viper, which is the park's Aero Mega Looper coaster. This is a very similar ride to what Kings Island had in Vortex, Great Adventure with Scream Machine, and Great America with Shockwave. It's a giant 7 inversion Aero Mega Looping coaster, and it definitely has its pros and cons. For one, it is extremely intense. Those first 3 vertical loops had me graying out whether I was in the front or the back. It was ridiculously intense. The first drop was also really cool in the back rows. You had a nice amount of whip to it. The ride itself is definitely a little rough around the edges. It is not super smooth, but to me, the extremely intense ride experience and the variety of forces definitely make up for the ride experience, which itself wasn't necessarily the smoothest, but was definitely a very enjoyable ride, especially considering I never got to ride Scream Machine at Great Adventure, and this is definitely the closest that there still is to that. Moving on to number 7, we have Batman the Ride, and for me, this is definitely the best Batman clone that I have ridden. This one, for whatever reason, ran glass smooth, definitely one of the smoothest B&Ms I've ever been on, and it was super intense and fast. Probably ran the fastest out of any of the Batman clones I have seen. Of course, if you've ridden one Batman clone, you've pretty much ridden them all. Same layout, but that layout is super intense, super punchy, and just has some of the best inversions out there. This one in particular, like I said, was super smooth and super intense. Moving on to number 6, we have West Coast Racers, which is the park's multi-launching dueling premier coaster. And what's really cool about this one is it's a Mobius loop, so you get to go around both tracks in one ride. And this ride is guaranteed to duel, which is a flaw that a coaster later on in the list definitely suffers from. But this one is really cool. There's a lot of great interactive elements. I do wish it didn't have those comfort collar restraints, as the ride would definitely be a lot more enjoyable without them. But that first high five element after the first launch is really good and surprisingly intense. The inversions lift you up out of your seat with their hang time, and that helix in the middle of the ride is very forceful, far more forceful than I expected. This overall is a really fun ride. Like I said, it would definitely be better without the comfort collars. You're constantly either banging your ear, your neck, or your head into them. But if you can avoid the pain that comes with those, this ride is really good. Moving into the top 5, at number 5 we have Full Throttle, which is the park's other premier launch coaster. This one being not dueling, but definitely bigger and more intense than West Coast Racers. This coaster starts with a 70-mile-an-hour launch into one of the world's tallest vertical loops. This is one of the greatest inversions out there. You're just dangling out of your seat, especially because this one does not have comfort collars. It's just the lap bar. So you really feel all of the hang time, and it's absolutely awesome. From there, you have a couple of surprise elements, an inversion, and of course, that final rise over the loop, which the drop off of that gives some ridiculous ejector airtime in the back row. Of course, this ride is extremely short, one of the shortest extreme coasters at the park, but looking at the ride itself, it really does offer a lot in its short duration. I do think the best parts of the ride is that hang time filled vertical loop, as well as the drop. Even though it is cut short by brakes, you really get a nice pop of ejector airtime going down that drop, which is why I have Full Throttle kicking off the top 5. Moving on to number 4, we have Wonder Woman Flight of Courage, the park's newest coaster. This is an RMC Raptor, a near clone of Jersey Devil at Great Adventure. This one I do find to be a little better than that one, just because I find it runs faster and smoother. The first half of the layout is always great. You have some really solid inversions, airtime moments, lateral pits, all of that, really strong layout. And what I find about this one that makes it better than Jersey Devil is that the second half runs significantly faster. So each one of those hills actually gives you some really strong airtime. And I do like the ending of this one with that weird sort of wave turn into that overbank. It really does change it up a little bit in a way that I really like. So if you've ridden Jersey Devil, you pretty much know what to expect with this one, but it's still a really good ride. Now we get into the top 3, and all 3 of these coasters are extremely elite. I was having some trouble ranking the 3 of them because they were all just so good, but coming in at number 3 we have Tatsu, which is the park's gigantic B&M flying coaster. Now if you know me, I'm usually not a huge fan of the flyers, especially the Superman clones, but this one is completely different. You start off with this huge drop and all of these giant sweeping elements that really showcase the height and speed of this ride, and the whole ride as a whole is very intense. It's constantly moving at a good pace, never letting up or slowing down, and the whole ride is building up to this giant pretzel loop that sends you way down the bottom of this hill. One of the most intense moments on any coaster out there. You can't even breathe as you're going through the element because it's just pushing against you so intensely, and the views you get on this ride is just absolutely amazing. This was a ride that I had high expectations for, but it was still blown out of the water. Tatsu is definitely a ride that should not be slept on, one of the best coasters in California. Now we have the top 2, and at number 2, personally, I have placed X2. X2 is one of the most unique coasters out there, originally opening as X. It was Arrow's last coaster. This is the ride that put them into bankruptcy, and while I am sad to say that, I do think that this is one of the best coasters they have ever made, probably the best coaster they've ever made. It is so unique. You have all these flipping sensations. That first drop just sends you flying. All of the elements are super intense, airtime filled. You're constantly flipping around, and I actually found the ride to be fairly smooth, which I know a lot of people tend to have an issue with this ride. I thought it was very smooth, even on the outside seats, and that final Raven dive just throws you and whips you around. It's an absolutely insane ride that words cannot do justice for. But coming in at number 1, I do prefer Twisted Colossus, which is the park's RMC hybrid coaster. This ride truly is a masterpiece. You have some of the best airtime moments out there, 2 of the best drops, that's right, 2. This is the other Mobius loop coaster at the park, meaning you get to go around both tracks. The biggest flaw with this ride, though, is that it's very rare to get a duel. You're not guaranteed to duel with the other train every time, especially on our visit. There were only 2 trains running, and the crew definitely was trying, but they weren't able to pull off a duel, unfortunately. But even without a duel, this ride is amazing. Some great airtime moments, excellent inversions with that 0G roll and Top Gun stall. This is definitely one of the best RMC coasters out there, and in my opinion, the best coaster at Six Flags Magic Mountain. With that being said, that's going to conclude my rankings for the coasters of Magic Mountain. I know there were a lot of omissions because they were all closed, but this park definitely has one of the best coaster collections out there. So many absolutely awesome attractions. I want to know what you guys think about my rankings. Let me know down in the comments. If you guys enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you all in the next video. Goodbye, guys.